Hello, welcome to another live Google Hangout on the Living Income Guaranteed. Today we are going to be discussing the affordability of universal basic income. Now, we have been making these Hangouts precisely to get the word out of what can be done to precisely support ourselves and get through the ongoing crisis and general downward spiral that our economy is subsumed in around the world. And basic income is a great idea, but many times the point of affordability comes to the table, and there are certain voices, such as from the economist, the Belgian economist Paul de Grave, that say, well, basic income is simply impossible, which was an article that was published in December 30th of the last year. And it was directly translated by our guest today, and it goes in a way creating the preamble of our discussion today, which is universal basic income affordable, and where do we stand as living income proposal? So to discuss this, we have Maite Zamora Moreno from the Living Income Guaranteed movement, living in South Africa, originally from Belgium. Hi Maite, and welcome to the Hangout.
Hi, Marlen.
So to remind all our viewers, we are connecting with South Africa, so there's going to be quite a lag at times. Please bear with us. There's going to be open questions and comments that you can place in the Google event. So if you are already there, you can see place your question here. If you're watching in the YouTube link, you can click on be part of the conversation, and then you will be taken to the Google event. We will be talking for about 40 minutes, so make sure that your question or comment is placed throughout that time frame. And let's begin with, for anyone that is new to this topic, what is the universal basic income and what does it propose, Maite?
Well, the universal basic income proposal refers to providing everyone of a specific country, whichever country implements a universal basic income or a UBI, to provide a basic income for every citizen, no matter if they're working, no matter if they earn a lot, earn a little, if they're, doesn't matter what profession you're in, everyone gets a basic income, an income high enough to live on. Yeah, that is the specific universal basic income approach, is to give everyone a basic income. And that is where the affordability question often comes in. Like, if you have 10 million people in a country, how are you going to provide each of them with enough money to live? And where others, for instance, propose, well, is it necessary to give everyone a basic income? Because there are people who, make use of the system as it exists today, who have a job, who are able to support themselves, who even maybe live lives of luxury. And we all know that there's people who live in richness, other people just get by. Is it necessary to give everyone a basic income? So the basic income movement is a big one, in terms of many people would like to see that everyone receives, or at least has, enough income to live on, as a guarantee, because it's a human right. The universal basic income movement suggests we give that money to everyone. Other movements suggest, for instance, the negative income tax. The living income proposal also has a different.
So the reason for universality, then, it's quite clear. Everyone gets it regardless of age or whether they are employed or not. And that sounds good, as you were mentioning, as a human right. However, when we come to the point of, is it doable, is it affordable, how would we make it happen? So what does universal basic income propose?
Well, there's more than just a reason for guaranteeing human rights, in terms of why would it be necessary to make it universal or unconditional to everyone. One reason, for instance, is to prevent people moving into unemployment, because why would I, work for money if I can do nothing and just receive money? That's the psychology of, it seems like punishment to work and have to earn my money because others are getting something and I'm not getting it. What if I just go and stop working? Then I will also just get money. So that's the dynamic that is, I think, also a big part and the reason why it is advocated to make it unconditional or universal, to give it to everyone, to prevent that move from working, having a job, sustaining yourself, and instead just go and do nothing. Because regardless of whether you're working or not, everyone gets a basic income. The other reason is that it seems, well, not necessarily seems, I mean, obviously it would be more cost effective than, for instance, what we have today in the welfare state. Because it's a very simple point of write a check to every citizen, send it out, then there is no monitoring, there's no checking to make sure people are living up to certain standards. There's no, there's not a lot of paperwork. It's very straightforward. You have every citizen's name, have their address, send them a check, or make a transfer to their account. Simple. So it's a very easy system to administer. And from that perspective, it's not very costly. So those are, I think, the three reasons. The concept of giving it to everyone because everyone has a human right, mitigating unemployment, and making it less costly. So with the living income guaranteed, for instance, we understand all of those goals, and definitely they're needed to be pursued. But there is the question of, is it necessary to do it through giving everyone a basic income? Is there no other ways? And here, for instance, when looking at the human rights point, well, those people who have a job and are able to sustain themselves, who have more than enough, there is no question of human rights violation there. So from that perspective, if those who need it get a living income or a basic income, and the people who work and are supported are fine, then everyone's human rights are set, are guaranteed. There's no need for giving extra money. From the perspective of mitigating unemployment, there we suggest that we actually raise the minimum wage, make it double the amount of the living income. So even if those who don't work receive enough to live off, if you go and work, you have an extra incentive because the minimum wage will allow you a life of luxury, because it will be at least double what a person receives when they're not working or when they're, when they're unemployed or choose not to work, whatever. So you have that extra incentive to go and take up employment because a lot more becomes possible when you have more money. Making it less costly to administer, well, we understand the points of trying to make it very simple with giving everyone a universal income, but I would say that to presume that giving only those people who needed the basic income would cost as much as the administration of welfare state is again making a big leap, because we can make it very simple as well with living income or basic income to say, well, give it to those people who are unemployed, give it to people who, who are now receiving a pension or are retired. Give it to those people, whether they are unemployed for 5 years, 1 month, 1 week, doesn't matter. They're unemployed, they receive a basic income. So it's still very simple. So it won't cost a lot, and definitely not as much as we have now in the welfare state. It wouldn't be as paternalistic. So those same principles apply. It's not as simple as universal basic income, but it's simple enough.
Yes, one of the common critique as well comes in the sense of the means testing, and Guy Standing, for example, says that it's really not acceptable to place people through that burden of having to fill in all of these pages to get this kind of benefit, which should be a very straightforward process, as you mentioned, and we fully agree on that. But if we can make it as simple as, are you employed, are you receiving any form of income, are you disabled, and replying no, then you get access to your guaranteed basic income in such manner, because you would also get, I mean, if you're employed, if you're perceiving an income, that means that you have an option to get higher income as we propose it in the living income. So, I mean, it's either for you to accept the provision of that basic income or get a higher wage in your job. which makes sense, and it's a quite an either-or type of option. So that is a simplicity that we also suggest. Go ahead, you were mentioning something.
Yeah, so to just actually now start to answer your question, if you look at is it affordable, then is it doable? Because theoretically, many argue that it is affordable, meaning there are ways to generate enough income or enough funds, enough money to be able to provide everyone with a basic income high enough to support your health. Now, to understand, I have nothing against that for the living income guaranteed movement. It's just a matter of practicality. I mean, as a concept, it's beautiful. Giving everyone the money, it's amazing. We're just looking at, first, is the money there? Which many say it is there, cool. Then the next question is, will you be able to actually access that money and allocate it now towards the basic income? Because if you look at organizing such a big stream of money, you're going to have to go to income tax as a source of revenue for funding the basic income. And that's where I start becoming a little bit concerned about whether it is doable. Not whether it is affordable, but whether it is doable. Because income taxes, they will present you with a few other problems. For instance, well, the first one is obvious, that those who work, earn money, and get paid, it's their income that gets taxed. It's their income that is now going to fund the lifestyle and for the lives of people who don't work. That just in itself creates a dynamic of resentment. Even if they also receive basic income, either it will up their income a little, it will get cancelled out with the tax deductions, or they will pay more tax than the basic income itself. So there's not as much of a reward, perceived reward, when you're working and you have to pay tax. Because then you're always going to have in the back of your mind those people who are not working and they just get a living income or basic income given to them unconditionally. It's a beautiful concept, but we have to remember the psychology and the social dynamics that may become involved. Even now, there is a reason the welfare state is so complex. It's because taxpayers' money goes into it. They want to know that only the people who deserve it get access to the money. That is why there are so many checks. That is why people want to make sure if the money is not spent on this or that. You know, why people use food stamps instead of just giving cash transfers. And I'm wondering if, if the basic income, a universal basic income, is funded through income taxes, will we not end up right where we are now? Exactly in the same position, where more and more that demand will come of, but why are we simply giving our taxpayers' money to those people? We want to check that they're using it wisely, things like that. I wonder if the same patterns will not simply manifest again, leading us to the exact same position we're trying to move away from.
That is an interesting perspective, and also many people might talk about, well, you might tax the rich further, and we call it this punitive measure in essence. What's your perspective on this? Because as you're saying, it's not about affordability, but about what it implies to get someone's basic income through someone else's taxes, which does create a lot of resentment, and it's one of the greatest problems that we have also in Europe, for example, in relation to immigrants. They get there, they get the benefits, and people are complaining that, oh, well, those immigrants are getting our benefits, essentially that should be for our people and is coming through my work. So we want to move away the notion of providing this human living right being funded by people's income taxes to finding other means. So before we get to what we propose, what's your perspective on taxing the rich more?
Well, yes, that is obviously a very, how do you say, tempting route, because you know that there's money there. You know the rich have high incomes, so if you tax the rich more, proportionally more to other people, then you will very quickly and easily, gather the money you need. But is it going to be that easy, really? I mean, you can remember, I don't know, maybe if you remember, in France, where President Hollande tried to implement a 75% tax on the rich, super tax. It was highly supported. It got him in office. It was amazing, especially on the left side. People were ecstatic. Finally something is being done. Yeah, but then what happened to that? Do you know if that is being done? Are the rich being taxed that much? No, that didn't happen. I mean, it was suggested, proposed as a law. It was then declared unconstitutional because it was seen as punitive to the people who were earning that income. Punitive meaning it's as though you're now punishing them for earning a lot. And that is also a dynamic you have to consider in general, not even just with taxing the rich, but taxing incomes, is that it can easily be perceived as a punitive measure where, working is something you're trying to disencourage. Because now you're working, now you have to pay taxes. So, just stopped my thread there for a moment.
I would also argue that
yes,
waging war against the rich is not the way to go. I mean, we already have like this 1% versus 99% type of dilemma, and instead of making them the problem, why not instead making measures that can be applied for everyone, which is what we will be talking about here in relation to taxes. And so remove that divide and conquer mentality of, oh, let's tax the rich more and seeing them as a problem, when in fact there are other ways that can be implemented and not necessarily going through the punitive route. So yeah, go for it, Mike.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was the experience in France. I mean, step after step, they basically had to water down the proposal more and more until eventually there was really nothing much left of it. There was really no change at all, because those in the position of having to then, with the prospect of then having to pay more taxes, they would just take action to either move their wealth elsewhere, move their income, just simply go and live in another country. And that's going to affect your economy, because obviously the rich and wealthy play an important role in your economy. There's no way around that. But what I wanted to touch upon, and I remember now, is the point also of the punitive aspect of income taxes, where, when they talk about study cases where they tried the basic income and mostly witnessed that there was not much of an unemployment effect, meaning people would continue working even if they received a basic income. Most of those studies don't include that dimension of the punitive aspect of income tax, because the money in those study cases was simply made available. It wasn't tested in a society where they would actually, impose higher taxes, then see what effects it had on your employment level. Only the aspect of giving the basic income was considered within unemployment, but not the aspect of, well, if I go and tax people more, what's going to happen to unemployment? And that's the point that was also made in the article by Paul de Grauwe, which I think was misinterpreted by many people, thinking that he was saying that, if you give a basic income to everyone, then people will work less because they have money and they won't have an incentive. But that's not what he was saying. What he was saying is that, taxing income and having your basic income funded through income taxes is going to have a punitive effect, and is going to, from that perspective, psychologically make people not want to work, because it's almost like you're punishing them for working.
Exactly. I mean, it's rather like, okay, I'd rather get my basic income. I do not work. It's going to be the same thing because I was going to get taxed anyway if I work. We have a comment from Valdir Pimenta. He's saying, I'm kind of confused. It sounds like you both support a conditional basic income, and Maite is kind of playing devil's advocate. I mean, I am not getting a clear message for unconditionality. Can you clarify?
Yes, I can. Well, my point is that I'm not against a universal basic income. If you can do it, if the money is there, if you can't, if your economy supports that kind of money movement, cool. If you have the support from the public and everyone is behind that and it's, everyone supports it, cool, do it. If you can do it, then cool, do it. But my question is that going to be how it works? Because if you consider how much support the basic income movement is receiving, both from the left and from the right, then you have to wonder, why is it not there yet? And the main point is the question of, is it affordable? And many people theoretically put forth a way of getting the money through these taxes and these taxes and these taxes, which all looks very good on paper. But we have to, I think, consider the possibility that it's not practically doable, or at least not yet. Maybe someday, but I think there's a lot of psychological and social contexts that need to be taken into account, and to remember that we have been living in a certain way for a very long time, and to change our attitudes just in one moment is not that simple. So I'm not saying I'm for, or I'm not saying I'm against. I'm just putting out some points to consider, and to maybe start opening up towards alternatives in case you find yourself encountering specific problems. Like, say you're moving forward with a proposal to increase income taxes to fund your basic income, and say that the response is actually quite negative. Obviously, the people who are in a precarious position, they will support it, but there might be a very big group of people that will be against it as well. So to already consider that and take into account that you might need to change strategies, and to, just like breathe and just make sure that you get to your goals. That is what is important. In the end, you want a society where everyone is taken care of. If that is done through unconditional basic income, cool. If it is done through other means, then that's also cool. Maybe at some point we will get, everyone will be ready to give an unconditional basic income. I'm wondering if the world we have today is ready for it.
And that's something that we also have to keep working, as well as in these hangouts and generally getting the word out there, as it is said, because the moment that we find one person that says, oh no, I'm not willing to give my taxes to fund someone else's basic income, you will still have to consider that person's perspective. And that's why we created the living income guaranteed as an alternative, a way forward toward the same goal, as Maite is saying, but considering people that might oppose it, and just make it something that is more agreeable when no one's taxes or no income taxes are applied to fund it, which is a very, very important aspect that we're emphasizing in this hangout, because it's one of the points that make people angry the most when they have to do, give their income to these unemployment benefits and welfare, essentially, and also to the people that simply will be benefiting from it and not considering where that money is coming from. So we have to really ensure that the money with which this living right comes from a source that is entitled to everyone as a human right. So let's get to that, Maite. The funding of the living income, what do we propose, and how is it different from how universal basic income is proposed?
As you said, we don't suggest to fund the living income through income taxes for all the reasons that we have just discussed. So what we suggest is to look at using the profits of companies that are related to human rights, or that are related to national resources. Say you have a country that's rich in gold or in diamonds, then to use the profits of those companies towards the funding of a living income. Same as with human rights companies, for instance, your electricity, power generating companies, you have profits from those companies be allocated towards funding a living income. So just to clarify, because this is a point that is often asked about, or people are confused about. What this often sounds like is to nationalize companies, to nationalize corporations. And now we know that there is many problems with nationalizing companies and nationalizing corporations. So I just want to clarify that we're not suggesting that companies be moved from private hands into the government's hands. We're suggesting that the companies be moved in private hands, meaning a small group of the private sphere, just a few people, and to instead place it in the hands of every single person of the country, meaning effectively make every citizen a shareholder of that company, and to then collectively decide to allocate those profits towards funding a living income. The one thing that might be, or we might see as a hurdle, is how to move those companies then from a few select people to everyone's hands. And in terms of nationalization, what we've seen there, because obviously in many countries, if the government starts expropriating corporations and companies and takes it out of private hands and makes it public property, it definitely disencourages investors. But if you look at the patterns, then the cases in which it was done properly, meaning there was actually compensation provided for the company, it was actually bought. It wasn't just taken, appropriated, it was bought. There was a actual payment of compensation. In those cases, it's cool because you're not saying we're going to randomly start grabbing companies. You're just making a transaction. And if you lay it out very clearly, this is the plan, this is what's going to happen, this is all that is needed in order to make this change towards current economic model, towards a new economic model, then that's it. It's a once-off point. If you look at taxing the rich, for instance, or high income taxes, it's a continuous point. People have to keep paying. People have to keep paying. If you simply use those profits from a whole range of companies, it becomes just a self-fulfilling cycle, because those companies, their profits will just go to people will spend it on those companies. So it just moves the whole time. You're not taking money away from one group and giving it to another group. Plus, what I find personally very cool about that road or that approach is that you're increasing, you're creating empowerment in citizens because they become owners of that company directly. There's no person in between. It gives economic empowerment and political empowerment because big corporations are a big player on the political landscape, and placing those positions in people's hands will have a huge impact on what decisions are made, both economically and politically, to make sure it's in the interest of the people, because they will be the shareholders voting on what happens. They won't be managing it. Of course, that would be totally impractical, but they will be the shareholders. They get to vote on meetings, they get to make shareholder resolutions for the way forward of the company, things like that. So it's a direct involvement, direct participation in big players in the economy and in politics.
And currently, this fits quite well when we see the corporations taking over essentially our natural resources, and many times we only resort to complaining. Well, there are these measures that can be applied wherein instead of just suggesting that corporations remove their hands off these resources, we can then integrate ourselves rather in these corporations, as you were mentioning, become decision makers, but at the same time directly benefit from it. And this is a very key aspect of the living income, wherein the money that you're receiving is not coming from someone else's income tax. It's coming from you being entitled to the use of those resources through the profit made of those companies that deal with them, that produce them. So that is what changes people's approach toward the basic income notion. It is no longer you living off of my income tax. It is you being entitled to these as a human right, no matter what. And this is the unconditionally aspect if you look at it, because if you fall off your job, you can immediately just ask for your basic income, living income, and it should be there. There's no conditionality to it. So that is also another approach of how it should be let's say, promoted or suggested, and it all lies on how it is funded, which is, in this case, making ourselves the literal shareholders of these companies and make ourselves entitled to these human rights as resources. So let's move on to the taxation, because we're almost running out of time. So how does taxation would work in the living income guaranteed, Maite?
Well, since the living income, as well as the changes in, for instance, making the minimum wage higher, those adjustments in itself would take care of a lot of problems that currently government spending has to address. So we do see that when you implement a basic income or living income, that your government spending is going to be a lot less. And so from our perspective, we see that we can also reduce or even scratch income tax, and instead just work with a transaction tax. Now, with a transaction tax, I'm not only referring to the value-added tax on goods. That is only one way of looking at it. I mean, that's only one aspect of your economy. You've got the goods market, you also have the financial market. And I was quite shocked recently when I was reading about the European Union only now talking about whether a financial transaction tax should be implemented. And I only realized in that moment that, well, hey, this whole time we're paying tax on transactions that happen in the goods market, and it seems that if you only work with transaction tax, you end up with quite little. But it's like the whole financial market is totally forgotten. There's not even a financial transaction tax. So why not make it the same? For every transaction that is made, there's just a small percentage of tax, both in the goods market and the financial market. And if you look at some amounts that are moving in the financial market, you'll see it will generate enough. And it's not like you have to give up a whole portion of your income. It's just whenever there's a transaction, whenever you make use of the system, you just contribute towards it. Because the system is not self-sustainable in an absolute sense. We know that there is adjustment needed. There is need for investment in infrastructure, things like that. So those funds have to come from somewhere. So if you understand that the system is here, it enables everything we do. I take part in it. So with everything I do, I will just contribute to it, just a little, just a little. And it's not a big deal, you know. It's not like you suddenly have to give up this chunk of money. It just becomes common practice. It's the same as with VAT. How often do you think about, gee, I bought this and this is the amount of taxes I paid on it? You don't. So I would suggest making it an across-the-board point, as just when you make use of the system, you pitch in. It's very simple. And it would definitely also, if you're going to then look at investing it in long-term solutions like infrastructure, education, preventative measures, you'll get a long way with less if you then scratch the income tax, but you do the across-the-board levy or tax. You can call it a pay-as-you-go tax. I quite like that reference. Then you will enable a lot, and you will be able to realize a lot.
And also simplify the whole taxation system and how it differs in, in terms of sales tax, value-added tax, or property tax, or corporate tax, which, as we know, has been evaded quite nicely with all of these tax havens around the world. So a way to also prevent that tax evasion, then just ensure that every single transaction is taxed. And also I would emphasize the necessity to make the tax collection system something that is readily open, where everyone can look at the amount of money that is being raked as a tax revenue and see where that is going to. Because right now many people have, see the word tax and a big angry face comes to everyone, because they know that they're not being used fairly, or for things that benefit everyone, or they're being siphoned to someone else's welfare. All of these things create this kind of resentment, because we're not directly looking at how is this money being used. So I would say that we also require to make like an open source type of system where we can look at, okay, this is the amount of tax that is being collected from every single transaction everywhere. I mean, it should be sufficient to not only fund a living income, but the rest of the government expenses, and still do quite well. And in that, there won't be any source of resentment of I'm getting this only this amount of income and etc. So this is something that should also clarify many of the questions that come through in relation to. So are you saying there's no corporate tax or there's no reduced tax rates for certain goods and products and services? Sorry. What about what people suggest as luxury items being taxed differently and stuff like that? What's your perspective?
Well, as you said, the simpler your tax system is, the easier it is for people to understand, and the less you're going to have situations where the rich will be able to find all the loopholes and take advantage of the tax systems because they can hire the lawyers who can navigate them through the systems. If you make it very simple, straightforward, then that is your strength within your taxation system, both in terms of accountability as well as making it fair. If you have obviously specific countries with particular problems that they want to tackle with specific taxes, I mean, sure, it's not for me to say. It's up to the people in that country to decide. You have to look at your own history, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and based on that, make a decision that you're happy with. I would just warn against making it very complicated.
We have a comment from Valir Pimenta. He's saying, transaction taxes are still vulnerable to evasion since businesses can be conducted in more favorable markets. Why not a land value tax instead? Land cannot be moved to a tax haven. And this is once again looking at you know, why do tax havens exist in the first place? Because of the amount of tax that is being eaten in certain countries, and that is quite a reality. So what's your perspective, Maite?
Yeah, I mean, those points in terms of the taxation systems, you're going to have to take it apart and find out what will work, make it so it's as clear as possible, transparent as possible, with as little loopholes as possible. I mean, if you automate the point as much as possible, then there's not going to be a space to go and evade the money. When you make a transaction, part of it moves away, moves out. Unless you're willing to forego on certain markets, then of course that's going to happen. But we have also discussed before that obviously, and it's the same for the universal basic income movement, to preferably make it global, have the same thing work everywhere. So that there's not one country that can take advantage of other countries, or people can just move away to another country and, you know, use advantages there. Obviously, I mean, taxes is a huge topic. It's a complex topic. There's much to say about it. So we're just laying out the basic foundation to consider of how things can be done differently. I mean, for instance, what I also like about this financial transaction tax is this is something that was brought up by the New Economic Foundation as one thing that really needs to happen, and that is to curb the financial markets. I mean, at the moment, there's no control there, it's not being regulated enough. It goes wild, and we have all these markets that crash, and we have depressions that set in, and it affects everything. It affects people's lives. So just putting in that transaction tax is already going to place a curb. It's not as unrestricted. It's not as unfettered. So just as an extra point of consideration.
Yes, and there's also a reason why, for example, tax laws in the US, in the United States, it's the most complicated thing, precisely to create this kind of loopholes that people can use to benefit them. So within this all, we have to consider that this taxation system is working currently that way because we as the people, the majority, are not in politics deciding how to make it simple. It has become a source of abuse most of the times, yes, because there is no clarity and not even understanding the amount of taxes or the types of taxes that are being applied. So if we do decide to simplify it, then there's not even going to be a difference of, oh, it's been applied to corporations or to this rich person, but every single transaction can be taxed, and we can make systems that work that way. So in this, we have to remind ourselves that we can decide how systems operate. We don't have to be subsumed to an idea of, oh, the system, it's already working that way, cannot be changed, because that's where we lose our notion of what our real political power and decision-making process implies in this case. So that's why living income guarantee proposal is also a political aspect in which we can make of the decisions that will benefit everyone a reality. And that currently doesn't exist because there's no political party for it, which is also what we are encouraging around the world, that basic income becomes a political force to be reckoned with. So, Maite, we're reaching the end of the Hangout. I'd like to get some last points from you, if you have any, or any other aspect on taxation. It's up to you.
Well, also just to add into what you said about there not being a political movement yet, I just saw today that there was a message placed on the Basic Income news network where they're announcing that they want to make a political party in the United States for the basic income bond. So that's the next step that is being taken there. So they're going to have a discussion there for anyone that is interested to contribute, to see, just to kind of open things up and see what comes out of it. So if you're interested, I think it will be in New York. So you could go and check out the message, see where it is. If you're interested, you could go and pitch in, maybe become part of that party.
And that's definitely placing a nice option to actually vote on in elections, because as we've said many times about being discouraged by our political system, of course, who wants to vote when you have the same old options every single time? But if you place now a new option that people can vote on and say, wow, that would really benefit everyone, then we can reclaim the real power that politics should have always had and get away from the old paradigm of the bipartisanship, for example, in the US. So definitely cool news, and I'm glad that this is happening. So thanks for that last note, Maite, and thanks for being here and for sharing with us all of these perspectives and to get some clarity on what living income is as a proposal and what UBI is.
Go, Marlen.
And thanks to you, the viewer. If you're watching us, in the YouTube video, please make sure that if you have a comment or a question for Maite or myself, just can place it there and we will get back to you, as well as wherever you see this video is posted on Facebook or any other social media site. Share it if you agree that there are ways to make this happen. There are alternatives, means, different roads that lead to the same point anyways, that we all have to realize we have the power to do this. We just have to join forces, get together, get informed, get our ideas running on how this can be done, and let's not wait more. Thanks for listening, watching, and see you next time. Bye, Maite.
Bye.